Morning, Internet. Welcome to a new week, à l'américaine, meaning welcome to Monday. So, today we wanted to sort of make a brief little video before going to class and sort of continue on what we were discussing over the weekend, and that is the following. We'd want to make a video about sort of the ability to read errors when your computer gives you an error. We've talked about this a little bit in earlier videos, but I think there are some things in the domain of LTC learning to code that merit being brought up relatively frequently, if not multiple times. Maybe it's the inverse. That I think in the domain of LTC, there are a number of things that deserve to be brought up a number of times, if not frequently. That seems a little bit more logical. But I think here it's just the idea that we talked about, or the ideas that we talked about this weekend and discussed or posed to the community as sort of theses was that one sort of skill or one sort of really large benefit or phenomenon that you might experience when learning to code is the idea that you just won't understand the question of what the question is asking. And sort of my thesis or one of our working theses with having talked to other classmates and members of the community is that at some point it might débloquer, you might just it might just happen, it might just unlock, it might just occur where you now start to understand what the questions are asking, and you'll be able to sort of at least think about how to answer those questions. So that in of itself was interesting, at least to me, in my view. But then in the later video, we talked about sort of the idea of if you may have a difficulty first understanding what the question is asking, one way to sort of unlock that or accelerate the change from not knowing what the question is asking to knowing what the question is asking sort of as a tendency or default is by exposing yourself to a number of questions, like the sort of a volume question, well, volume and quality, right? But if you're able to sort of just do more structured problems, you have more chances to understand what the problem or the question is asking, and then you're also able to sort of better understand perhaps how to answer it. So that was sort of the second video. In this video, we want to, as we said earlier, discuss sort of just the ability or the savoir-faire of really just reading or tolerating the reading of errors. So as a débutant, as a beginner, when I first started learning to code, and even now, sometimes I'll just become really impatient with whatever my computer is saying, particularly if it's two things. One, an error, or two, technical documentation. Again, we've discussed both of these sort of topics in other videos, and we'll probably discuss them in further videos because I think they're both super, super important. If we were to develop a tool belt for a programming superhero, right? We could make it more like a slide rule and a pocket protector and get kind of nerdy, not to reinforce stereotypes. But if we were to actually make a more realistic tool belt, irrespective of stereotypes, it would sort of have these four components that we've talked about, right? Of understanding what the question is asking, the ability to do multiple problems, or just it sort of translates to writing code, right? Which is another thing we've talked about. Just the way to learn to code is to write code, not to read about others writing code, not to read Y Combinator or what is it? I'm sort of blanking on TechCrunch articles or all of these different sites. It's actually just to sit down, do problem sets, do problems and build projects and stuff, right? Actually write lines of code, and then there are ways that you can sort of facilitate that into being more rather than less productive. But one of the other things would be to be able to tolerate or read errors. And so I'm just going to open up my computer. At some point, we'll potentially create some content, create a course, or just some videos of like sort of maybe giving you an inside view to how I think about or we think about using tools like the Chrome debugger for JavaScript, or in the suite that we're using with Rails, it's like RSpec and different stuff like that. But I think when I've been learning to code, sometimes it's just really useful to see how other people think. And so I suspect, I have a hypothesis that could be really useful for sort of just giving an inside view into debugging or reading errors. But I'm going to open my computer because there was this quote that I wrote from class. And one of my instructors had this quote about reading errors that I thought was really, really cool. I just have to think where I put it. So if you could see my computer, you'd see me hitting Command Spacebar to open up the search bar. Then I type in Chrome to open up Chrome. I'm going to go to Asana because, Asana is cool. Actually, it's just a task tracking tool. I personally like it a lot. Trello is also not bad. In GitHub, you can use like GitHub projects. It's like a sort of like a Kanban task tracking tool also. And that's kind of cool because it has an integration, like a native integration with GitHub. So anyway, I won't bore you with project management stuff, but I think it's kind of fun. It's like kind of fun to geek out over sometimes. But anyway, in Asana, I have different project folders or different like thought folders where I just like sort of log stuff. I don't know that it's the most effective or efficient system, but it's something I developed 4 years ago. I just like haven't really changed. There's like a fair amount of search cost and like switching costs in terms of like trying to get all of my data out of Asana into another system. That doesn't sound fun. Anyway, I have a folder for my class, or like a project dossier, and then I have one here, and let's just see. Okay, so I'm gonna read in French and then I'll translate. It's relatively simple, but like it's just the idea that the vrai savoir, c'est de. I'm gonna try again because my thought was I was gonna try to like half read and half look at you, and that epically failed. So I'm just gonna like fully focus on the computer and then we'll go from there. Not that having someone read to you is gonna be fun, but whatever. Just bear with me. Le vrai savoir, c'est de savoir lire les erreurs, which means like the real know-how or the real trick is to know how to read errors. And I just find this so interesting in that like it can be incredibly discouraging when you get in here because essentially that means there's a problem with your code. Or probably there's a problem with your code, right? It could be a problem with the computer or the specs or whatever, but let's just say there's a problem with your code, or one's code, my code. And it can be incredibly discouraging, right? Because the computer doesn't really have feelings per se. It's just like this binary set of controls which will tell you whether you're right or wrong based on certain specifications. But a lot of times when the computer's either telling you that you're wrong or that it doesn't understand, like that's a giant gift. And if you can sort of dig into that and you can sort of lean into that and enjoy sort of understanding why the error is coming up and what it means, that can be really interesting. So for example, over the last couple weeks, we were like working with Ruby on Rails, and like sometimes the errors, at least for us, are generally in black, white, and red, kind of like a newspaper. But like sometimes you'll get an error, and if you like, there's just so much text, and as a layman, as a beginner, you just like maybe won't want to read that. But if you sort of even just get the habit or get the skill of knowing where in all of that text to focus your attention, you'd be like, oh, focus your attention, like route, like blah, 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 address not found, or like routes error, meaning like sort of in the MVC controller, you haven't properly defined your routes. Don't worry if you don't understand that. It's very specific, I guess, to to certain frameworks with web development. But it's just like, my point is, one of the errors will tell you that like the route is not found. The other will tell you that like not authorized, or the other will tell you like unable to print or something, or like unable to show because you have an issue with your show. We'll make an explicit and intentional video for this, but it's just to say that like if you think about developing the skill of reading errors, I think that would actually likely materially accelerate your learning or your ability to learn programming, just because I feel like most people, at least in the beginning, you're going to get a lot of errors. I think even as you develop as a developer or as a programmer, or just a person with technical kind of skills, like know-how, you're still going to get errors, particularly when you're doing things you don't know. So the sooner you can develop the ability or tolerance to read errors, I think the better off you'll be. Obviously, that's easier said than done, because there's like so many things in the space of LTC, learning to code and just learning programming in general, that it's like nearly impossible to focus on all of them, at least for most humans. So I don't want to be coy in saying that you should do this, when I've also said that maybe you should do like 10 other things. It's clearly a sorting game and a prioritization game. Maybe it's not a game, maybe it's very serious. But in any case, I think it's just like interesting to try to be aware of and maybe keep in mind. And if you so choose to, or are lucky enough to, it could be an interesting skill to develop in the future. In summary, this video was about the sort of the ability to, or tolerance of reading errors, and how that might positively or negatively, mostly positively, affect your journey on LTC, learning to code. We sort of tied that back to two of the earlier videos that we made over the weekend. One of sort of just the phenomenon of like not even understanding what the question is asking, and two, the idea of, in order to understand what the question is asking, one strategy is just to have a fair amount of exposure to problems, right? So like doing a lot of problems. We sort of tied that back to certain other videos we made earlier in this project, like around just the idea of like, in order to learn to code, you really need to write code rather than just read about code, or sit on the sidelines. It's really like a participative sport, or participative activity. And so sometimes I have difficulty with words, particularly on camera. I think it's like, sometimes I get really conscious. Anyway, and I think that's as far as I can recall the majority of what we talked about. Feel free to add some fun comments in the comment section if I forgot anything. But moving on to the last sort of part of this video, we'd love to know what you think about this topic. Do you have experience in reading errors? Do you have a natural like or dislike of it? Has that natural like or dislike changed over time? Kind of common suggestions, common questions for you. Like, do you have any tips, anything that's worked or hasn't worked that you want to share with the community? Boom. Lay them in on the sections. Lay them in on the comments section is what I meant. Or you can connect with us website or other channels, and I think that's about it. We appreciate you taking the time to watch on this Monday morning, or whatever day, time of day you're watching. We're excited that you're watching this video, and that you've gotten this far or fast forwarded to this specific part. That's cool. No judgment. And hopefully we'll see you again either tonight or later in the week. So, okay, I'm gonna go to class. Catch you later, alligator. And a wild crocodile. Okay, now we're gonna launch our watch. Oh, we have 13 minutes to get to class. This is pretty good. Usually we have like 5, so we're gonna be late. Today we might be on time. Well, anyway, I'm gonna go, but have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.